My dad once looked me straight in the eyes and said, "Do you ever wonder what it would be like if it was just you and me? I was frozen. We hadn't touched. We hadn't crossed a line." But that moment, his voice, the way he said it, changed everything between us forever. You can't imagine what happened next. Welcome to Vows and Betrayals, where we share the stories most people are too afraid to tell. If you've ever felt like there was something left unsaid in your family, drop a single dot in the comments. Someone out there understands you. Whether you're new or have been listening for a while, thank you for being here. Hit subscribe to hear more raw, real, unforgettable moments. Let's begin. Hey, I'm Emily. I'm 21, just finished my junior year of college, and I came home for the summer thinking everything would feel normal, familiar, safe. My family has this old cabin in Vermont. It's tucked away by a lake surrounded by pine trees that creak in the wind. The kind of place where nothing ever really changes. The walls still smell like coffee and wood smoke. The floorboards still groan under the same spots. And silence. Silence here feels like it's part of the furniture. Mom had just left the day before. She was headed on a 5-day Catholic pilgrimage with some women from church. She packed light, kissed me goodbye, told Dad to take his blood pressure pills, and reminded us both to behave. So it was just me and Dad. At first it felt good, comforting even. We sat on the porch that morning, drank iced tea, and watched the lake. Talked about my classes, old neighbors, the geese. He laughed more than usual. His face looked softer, more at ease. He seemed open, like a version of himself I hadn't seen in a long time. I didn't realize right away how quiet everything had become. There was no humming from the kitchen, no clinking mugs, no soft footsteps, just the lazy whirl of the ceiling fan and the occasional creak of the house settling into the day. We made lunch, grilled cheese and tomato soup. Simple. He burnt one side and laughed like a kid caught sneaking snacks. I laughed too, louder than I expected. It felt warm, familiar. But then something shifted. Not loudly, not suddenly, just shifted. It was the way he looked at me, like he was seeing something he wasn't supposed to. Not in a creepy way, not exactly, but it was different. Softer, longer. There was weight in his eyes, like he was holding something back. I told myself I was reading too much into it, that I was overthinking things. But when I stood to take our plates to the sink, I could feel his gaze follow me, and I didn't know how to feel about that. The air felt heavier by the minute, like when the sky is still blue, but the pressure's already changing. You can't see the storm yet, but something inside you knows it's coming. That evening, after dinner, Dad asked if I wanted to watch something together. Just us, I asked, not thinking too much of it. He smiled, like old times. We settled into the worn-out couch in the living room. The TV was already a little too loud, the way he always had it. He scrolled through the options and hovered over a black and white film, one of those slow romantic dramas where nothing explodes but everything feels like it might. "How about something classic?" he said. "Sure," I replied, pulling my knees up under me. The movie was full of stolen glances and unsaid words. The kind of love story where the tension builds not through touch, but through the aching silence in between. And somewhere in the middle of it, I started noticing him watching me. Not constantly, but during certain scenes where the couple would lean in just a little too close, his eyes drifted over. I kept my gaze locked on the screen, but I felt it. Every time. A flicker in the side of my vision. A change in the air. It was probably nothing. But then he spoke. "Emily," He said, his voice quiet like he wasn't sure if he should finish the thought. Do you ever wonder what it would be like if it was just you and me? My breath caught. I turned toward him slowly, unsure if I'd heard him right, but he wasn't smiling. He wasn't joking. What do you mean? I asked, even though I already had an idea. His eyes searched mine for a moment, and I swear I could see him hesitate. Just if things were different. If your mom wasn't here? If it had always just been you and me? There was no laughter in his voice, no sarcasm, just something raw, unfiltered, like a truth that had been waiting at the back of his throat for far too long. I didn't respond right away. I couldn't. The room suddenly felt too small, the couch too close, the silence too loud. I should have gotten up. I should have said something. But instead, I just sat there, heart pounding in my chest, unsure of what scared me more, the question, or the fact that part of me didn't hate the way it sounded. He looked away first, and I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. The movie kept playing, but I don't remember how it ended. The next day was heavy with silence. Not the kind that comes from peace, but the kind that hums just beneath your skin. Like a low static you can't quite turn off. We didn't talk about what he said, not directly, but it hung between us, dense and invisible, like humidity before a storm. I could feel it in the way he didn't look at me during breakfast, and then in the way he looked just a little too long when I walked into the living room later. Around noon, I sat on the porch with a book trying to lose myself in fiction. He came out with 2 glasses of iced tea and sat across from me. We didn't say much. The trees rustled, the lake shimmered, and yet inside my chest, it felt like I was standing at the edge of something steep. I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable last night, he said finally. I closed the book without marking the page. You didn't. He nodded slowly. Still, it was selfish. I know that. I didn't answer right away. My fingers traced the condensation on my glass. Do you really feel that way? I asked, barely above a whisper. He didn't pretend not to understand. Yes, he said, more than I should. I looked up at him then, and he was already looking at me. We didn't smile. We didn't flinch. His hand was resting on the armrest between us. Without thinking, I reached out, barely brushing my fingers against his. It wasn't a grab. It wasn't a hold. Just a touch. He didn't move. And neither did I. It felt like forever. Like the world paused in that instant, just long enough for both of us to realize we were somewhere we weren't supposed to be. I pulled my hand back first. The air between us shifted. He looked down. I looked away. But the moment had already happened. It was real. And it was there now in the silence. In the way we kept still. In the way we both knew we had stepped close to a line neither of us had ever imagined crossing. But we hadn't crossed it. Not quite. And yet, it already felt like something irreversible. Mom came back 2 days earlier than planned. I was in the kitchen, slicing an apple, when I heard the car door slam. Her familiar voice floated through the open window. Cheerful, hurried, like she was excited to be home. I froze. Dad was in the living room. He stood slowly, eyes flicking to mine for half a second, before he smoothed his face into something neutral. The front door opened. Surprise, she called, dragging her suitcase inside. They canceled the last part of the trip because of weather. Something about the roads being flooded. So I figured, why not come home early? She dropped her bag with a soft thud and opened her arms. I let her hug me, her perfume warm and familiar. Dad stepped in, next wrapping his arms around her. We missed you, he said, voice calm. Too calm. Did you two have a quiet weekend? She asked brightly. Yeah, just movies and grilled cheese, I said too quickly. Her eyes moved between us. That's sweet. Hope you didn't burn anything. Dad laughed softly. Just one sandwich. The rest of the day moved like a stage play scenes unfolding with pre-written lines. We ate dinner at the table. She talked about her trip. We nodded and smiled. I stirred my food, not tasting a thing. But the silence under our words was deafening. I watched Dad how he avoided looking at me for too long. How he nodded at the right moments, but his smile never reached his eyes. And I realized something awful. We were all pretending. Pretending we were fine. Pretending nothing had shifted. Pretending we hadn't almost said things that couldn't be unsaid. I felt like I was living in a lie that no one else saw. Like I was the only one who knew the script had changed, but everyone was still acting like we were in the same play, and I had to hit my mark. Say my line. Laugh when I was supposed to. But inside, something was cracking. That night, we watched a sitcom together, one of Mom's favorites. She laughed out loud at a joke. Dad chuckled too. I sat there on the far end of the couch, wrapped in a blanket that suddenly felt like a disguise. When I glanced at Dad, he was already looking at me. Just a second. Just enough. His eyes were tired, haunted, but still something else. Something that made my stomach twist. I looked away quickly, forcing a smile when Mom turned to say something. I don't remember what it was. All I remember was the way I felt like I was trapped in a scene I hadn't agreed to perform. It was 2 nights later when he brought it up. We were alone again. Mom had gone to bed early, and the house had fallen into one of those midnight stillnesses where even the floorboards seemed afraid to creak. I was sitting on the rug in the living room, flipping through a magazine I wasn't really reading. He sat nearby, nursing a half-empty glass of whiskey fingers tapping against the side. Emily, he said suddenly softly. I looked up. We can't keep doing this. My heart skipped. I didn't answer. I know we haven't done anything. He continued, voice low, but it's still something. It's real. He leaned forward slightly, his eyes locking with mine. I think we need to tell her. Your mom. I stared at him, stunned. Tell her what? That something's changed. My breath caught. But we haven't crossed any lines. I know, he said. But feelings matter too. And I can't keep pretending nothing's happening. I didn't know what to say. My hands were cold suddenly, too aware of every sound in the room. A clock ticked. The air conditioner hummed. What if it destroys everything, I whispered. He sighed. Then at least it won't destroy us from the inside. That line hit me hard. Because deep down, I knew he was right. The pretending, the silence, it was eating us both alive. I nodded slowly. Tomorrow, he said. We sit her down. Together. The next morning felt wrong from the moment I woke up. Like the sky itself knew something was coming. It was overcast. The light in the kitchen felt colder than usual. We waited until after breakfast. Mom was rinsing her cup at the sink when Dad cleared his throat. Donna, he said gently, can we talk, all three of us? She turned surprised. Sure. Is everything okay? We sat in the living room. I couldn't look at her at first. Dad reached over and placed a hand over mine, a small gesture, but it made everything real. I need to be honest with you, he began. Her smile faded slowly. Okay. He glanced at me, and I nodded barely. There's something between me and Emily, he said quietly. She blinked. Silence. I could see her trying to process the words. Her brows furrowed, then lifted, then dropped. Her mouth opened, then closed. What do you mean? She said at last, her voice brittle. Nothing physical? I rushed in. We didn't do anything, but something shifted. She stared at us, eyes wide, unblinking, and then she stood up. Not a word, no scream, no questions, just silence. She walked slowly to the hallway, like her body had disconnected from her mind. Then her voice came almost hollow. I need, I need to breathe. And she left. The door didn't slam, but the sound of it closing behind her was louder than anything I'd ever heard. The morning light filtered through the kitchen window, but it brought no warmth. Breakfast sat untouched on the table toast, growing cold coffee left to cool in its mug. None of us had much appetite. Donna sat on the couch, straight-backed hands folded in her lap. Her smile was soft but uncertain. So, what's this about Richard? And I exchanged a look. Then he gently took my hand, not with affection, not like a lover, but in a quiet, symbolic gesture. His fingers trembled slightly. Donna's gaze dropped to our hands. Her smile faltered. Richard inhaled slowly, his voice lower than usual. There's something you need to know. Between me and Emily, something's changed. At first, she didn't react, as if the words hadn't reached her at all. Just a blink. Then another. But then, like a crack spreading across glass, the reality began to register. Her eyes widened slowly, involuntarily, until they looked too large for her face. No, she said, almost like a question. What do you mean Richard didn't move? He didn't look away? We haven't done anything physical, nothing like that. But we've crossed emotional lines, and it's not fair to keep that from you. She stared. Her lips parted, but no words came. Then her shoulders shook just slightly at first, before a single tear slid down her cheek. I wanted to reach out. I didn't dare. No, she whispered again. No, I don't believe this. I can't. Her voice cracked. Another tear, then another. She wiped her cheek with the back of her hand, but the tears kept coming. Her face had gone pale. Her lips were trembling. I trusted you, she choked. I trusted both of you. The room felt smaller, like the air had been sucked out of it. She stood up abruptly. Her hand gripped the strap of her purse so tightly her knuckles turned white. Don't, she said, as Richard started to speak. Don't say anything else. She turned toward the door, moving quickly now. Shoes tapping hard against the floor. We both stood frozen. She reached for the handle, hesitated just for half a second, then slammed the door behind her. No goodbye, no scream, just that echoing sound, sharp final, like a chapter closed with a single brutal stroke. I sank back onto the couch, hands shaking, breath shallow. Dad sat beside me, eyes blank. We did the right thing, he whispered. But the truth was, it didn't feel right. It just felt real. And real is rarely clean. No one called. Not Mom. Not Dad. And I didn't call either. I returned to campus with the weight of a summer that had no name. Not grief. Not guilt. Not quite love. Not hate. Just the ache of something that should never have been real. Classes had already started. Students filled the quad with laughter, music, careless energy. I walked among them like a ghost carrying a secret that pressed against my ribs with every breath. My roommate asked how my summer had been. I lied. Fine, I said. Quiet. But inside, 1,000 unsaid things screamed. I kept busy. Lectures. Reading. Writing papers I couldn't care less about. At night, I lay awake listening to the sounds of the hallway, blinking at the ceiling, wondering what my mother saw when she looked in the mirror now. Wondering if Dad regretted saying what he said. Wondering if I did. There were no photos on my desk this semester. I had packed one of our family, but I left it buried in the bottom drawer beneath a sweater I no longer wore. One afternoon, I passed a girl sitting alone on the library, steps crying quietly into her hands. Something about her grief, raw silent, made my own rush up like a wave. I sat 2 benches away, said nothing. We don't always need to speak to know someone else is hurting. I started journaling again. Not about what happened, but about the spaces in between, the couch where we sat, the film we watched, the knock at the door, Mom's face when we told her. I wrote one sentence again and again until the ink bled through the page. We didn't cross the line, but we're not on the same side of it anymore. Some things once imagined cannot be unthought. Some feelings once stirred never fully go back to sleep. One Sunday, I walked to the small chapel on the edge of campus. Not for confession, not for answers, just to sit in silence and breathe. I lit a candle for my mother, one for my father, and one for the girl I used to be before everything blurred. As the flame flickered, I realized I no longer wished to rewrite what happened. I just wanted to understand who I was now, in the wake of it. We hadn't crossed the line, but we had stepped too close, too far to ever return untouched, too much to pretend it hadn't meant something, but maybe just enough to learn from it. Some stories don't end with a clean break. Some simply leave a silence that speaks louder than anything ever said. We didn't destroy each other. We didn't act on what we felt, but we did let it grow, long enough to lose something we can never get back. And the hardest truth, even without touching betrayal, can bloom in the space between words. What I learned is this temptation isn't always loud. Sometimes it whispers from inside the people we trust most. But we still have a choice. Always. Even when the line is blurred, integrity is the moment we choose not to step over it. If you've ever stood at a crossroads between desire and conscience, if you've ever had to walk away from something that felt real but wasn't right, then you understand. This story isn't about blame. It's about owning what we feel without letting it own us. It's about knowing that walking away is also a form of love. Love for others. Love for yourself. Love for the life that still deserves to be whole. If this story touched something in you, just leave one word in the comments: boundaries. Because sometimes the strongest love is the one that knows when to stop. Thank you for being here with us at Vows and Betrayals. Hit subscribe if you believe some truths deserve to be told, even when they're hard to hear. Let's keep holding space for real stories, together. Now take a breath and carry this one with you.